Hi, I'm Libby, and I'm making this video to explain something that I thought was really interesting from my Fromm class on psychology, and it's directly from this book, Man for Himself. So if you want to buy it, you probably should because it's really interesting. The idea that struck out to me this week was the idea of the art of living. While a lot of people really enjoy the art of painting, drawing, sport, the art of medicine. Learning about different things and having a goal at the end of it is essentially what the art of means. Like for science or medicine, you know that at the end the person should obviously live or have a longer life or get rid of the disease. Whereas the art of living, people have kind of made it into something that everyone already knows how to do and that it's a simplistic idea. Whereas Fromm kind of explains that it's not as simplistic as people think, that the art of living comes from the good and bad sides of man, and the words good and bad really come from good for man and bad for man. In order to know what is good for nature, we need to see his nature. So in the world, there's essentially good and bad people that society has made up, and because of their nature, that's what creates them to be good or bad. Where instead now people just kind of look at it as they're a bad person because they go against society without really thinking how are they brought up, why are they doing what they're doing, and what creates this to become something that they believe so wholeheartedly in and that everyone else in the world thinks is a horrible thing. It's not that they know it's a horrible thing and are trying to go against society. They really believe that what they're doing is the right thing. So the idea of good and bad really comes back to how you're being raised, which is the art of living, because certain societies live where you think that this and that is okay, whereas other things, that is the worst possible thing that you could do. The drive to live, as Fromm says, is inherent in every single person. That the first instinct of an animal, an insect, a human being is to stay alive. And that's something that we're born with, that we know to do. No one, there's no societies based on dying where their entire existence is to die. It's just not something that we do. And essentially, so because that choice has already been made, the choice that people really need to make is the choice to live a good or a bad life. Whether to go with society blindly and understand what is going on and why people are doing what they're doing, and then blatantly just choosing society because that's what people do and following with the flow, or to understand society, see where it's coming from, and realize, parts of this aren't necessarily right for me as a person. I don't believe in what society's teaching, and maybe I'm gonna go do something different because that's what feels more necessary and right to me. It really depends on the person, but I think that people need to start realizing that, especially in America, we have the freedom of choice to do what we want to do and to make an impact. And the people in this world are the people who don't necessarily get along with social norms. Albert Einstein wasn't hanging out with everyone else, just socializing. He was figuring out things that weren't already invented. Kurt Cobain wasn't just making music like every single other person. He was creating something that others hadn't created yet. And that's why these people make such an influence on everyone else, because they're trying new things and realizing that maybe the old ways aren't always the best ways, and that with changing time, people need to be changing as well. The art of living really is important. I don't know how to stress that, because within this new age of technology, Fromm argues, which I also agree with, that man cannot feel happiness anymore, that their main goal in life is not happiness. The main goal in life is to fulfill duty and work and to succeed. This essentially is that life is based off of making money, and instead of being happy, you should be happy from making money. Where for some people this might be completely true, so it depends on the person. But for me personally, I don't think that happiness comes from monetary goods or from buying things from money to satisfy yourself for some very small need that just pops up. I think to be ultimately happy, to accept what others think of you, to accept yourself, to accept others for who they are and realize that every single person is an individual is one of the greatest things that someone could do. Because to be happy really means that you can create anything that you want and ignore anything that seems to be negative. In this modern society, it really seems like the idea of happiness and individuality has kind of lost itself with being online and creating different websites and using hashtags to explain something that everyone else has done. You're only noticed if your hashtag happens to be something that tons of people are thinking of at the same time. Instead of an individual idea, you have to make it on Instagram or on Facebook or Twitter for someone to notice it instead, because no one really goes outside as much anymore. They're kind of just on their computers and hashtagging. And the whole idea that Fromm is trying to say is that the duty to be alive is the same as the duty to become oneself or an individual. Because instead of as animals, humans really do have a duty to be an individual person, to create something new and not just go immediately with social norm. Because I mean, if it's right for you, then you can stick with that. But if you think that something's off and you just blindly accept it, that's how something really horrible can happen. And that's how evil in this world can happen. Just accepting and ignoring the idea that someone has really bad intentions. And people should start to realize that to be individual is to understand the thoughts that you have may be different from other people, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. It could really mean that they're really good thoughts and can really benefit society in ways that it hasn't before.